Ranthambhore National Park in the Aravalli Ranges is one of the best success stories of tiger conservation in India. The video we are making today is called Noor, Badlav and Aditya Dicky Singh.
Can you see me? Yeah.
Welcome, Aditya. We would like to hear from you the secrets of the success of tiger conservation in the Ranthambhore National Park.
So, Ranthambhore, if you go back in history, was a private hunting ground for the Jaipur royal family. They had this part till the river Banas, which is now Sawai Mansingh Sanctuary and Ranthambhore National Park, and Karoli royal family who had the Kela Devi Sanctuary. So these were two private hunting grounds of Maharajas. Till late 1940s, in fact, till early 1950s, almost till early 1960s. Even though in 1950, Ranthambhore, what is now Ranthambhore National Park, was declared a protected area. Somewhere in 1969, hunting got banned. All the somewhere in early 60s, all the parks were nationalized. And in 1973, Project Tiger was launched. So when Project Tiger was launched initially, 9 tiger reserves were selected as Project Tiger reserves. 8 of these tiger reserves had a decent, healthy population of tigers, while the 9th, which was Ranthambhore, was the only one with hardly any tigers. But they took it as a sort of a test case to see what they can do with an area which has very few tigers. The people who launched, the officers and the forest officials who launched Project Tiger in India, they used to tell us that between 1973 and 1979, if they saw tiger pug marks in the reserve, they would celebrate that because it was so difficult to find just pug marks. Fateh Singh Rathore, the legendary field director of Ranthambhore, he told us that he saw his first natural kill by a tiger, where a tiger had actually killed a wild animal and not a bait, in 1979, 6 years after this was launched as a project. 1080s, somewhere in 1980, they moved out 8 of the 12 villages within what is now the national park. And in 1980, this got declared as a national park. That kind of turned things around, and within 2-3 years, there were decent breeding population of tigers that were quite visible, and and since that period till early 90s, it was just a boom. Ranthambhore was doing better and better and better. Ranthambhore took 2 hits, one in early 90s, 91, 92. That was a bad time for tigers all across India. And again in 2002, 2003, 2004, which was again a bad time for tigers all across. But we still have we still have issues. Now the issues are, see, it's doing better. So we have something like, I'm not sure, but say 65 to 70 adult tigers in the entire Ranthambhore Tiger Reserve. This number has been, it was like in late 90s, we used to think that if there are 40 tigers in Ranthambhore Tiger Reserve, it is amazing. Then in 2010s, we started thinking 50. Now it's like close to more than 60. Now we've reached a place where there's about 1,500 square kilometers of tiger reserve, the area under 1,600 square kilometers of area under tiger reserve. About half of this has tigers, the other half doesn't. Some part of Ranthambhore, of course, about 30-40% of Ranthambhore, will not have tigers throughout the year just because of the terrain. Because these are plateaus which dry out totally in the summers. You don't find prey there, water there. But we've reached a stage where we now need to probably in the next few years work on the habitat to create more space for, say, 10 or 20 or more tigers. Secondly, the big thing telling us is that this should not become an island. As of now, tigers do migrate from here to MP They go to Kuno, Shivpuri, Shivpur, up to Datia. Datia is very, you almost more than halfway to Panna. But they go down in the Aravalis to Bundi, Kota. But these areas where they go down to up north, they go all the way up to Dholpur. Or almost one tiger had reached Mathura from here. But these passageways are shrinking. And this is so the next focus should be on these passages and on making the habitat within this passage slightly more tiger friendly or prey friendly. Or government is working on it. I personally get slightly frustrated that it's going too slow and this, that, but actually it's not going too slow, it's going reasonably fast. They've declared 2 areas south of Ranthambhore as tiger reserve, like Ramgarh Tiger Reserve and Mukundra Hill Tiger Reserves. They're planning to declare a tiger reserve in Dholpur. Now, these are reserves which don't have tigers as such. They're not teeming with tigers. They're not even teeming with prey. But once they get declared as a tiger reserve, the focus, the resources, the expertise, everything that the reserve gets goes up. And it overall adds to the protection. And I'm hoping that these areas too will do another Ranthambhore, like how Ranthambhore was in the 70s. These areas are like that right now. Maybe in 10 years, 15 years, who knows, they could be as good or better. So that is the whole story of how Ranthambhore kind of became a system.
These areas which you are talking about, they have villages inside?
We still do. So, you see, Ranthambhore is 1,600 square kilometers. It can be broken down into 4 major territories. One is the Ranthambhore National Park. There's no village inside the National Park.
Right.
Around the National Park, there's a ring of a sanctuary which is called Savai Madhopur Sanctuary. There are no villages in Savai Madhopur Sanctuary. Except for 1 or 2 villages almost touch the Savai Madhopur Sanctuary, but you can't. Then there's Savai Mansingh Sanctuary. There are villages inside Savai Mansingh Sanctuary. And then there is Kela Devi Sanctuary, which is almost half of Ranthambhore Tiger Reserve. And there are lots of villages inside Kela. More than that, you have to consider, this Tiger Reserve is one of the high population density areas of India. It is not the villages inside the Tiger Reserve. The other big thing they have is that within 1 kilometer of the outer boundary of the Tiger Reserve, if you go all around the Tiger Reserve, there are probably 500 villages and 15 or 16 towns. So the population living at the edge of the Tiger Reserve is very, very high. It's huge. It's a massive population. Within this population, within these villages, there's still corridors where tigers moved. They moved through the villages. So there's a program on to relocate the villages which are inside the sanctuaries or which are in the critical corridor belt. Relocation is very complicated. It's very expensive. It takes a lot of time, but it's being done at quite a spectacular rate.
So in this context, you are starting Badlav.
Yeah.
As a community forest with your own money. How significant you think it is for tiger conservation?
If you look at it in the major scheme of things, it's insignificant. It doesn't even matter. It's a tiny area. When you're talking about 1,600 square kilometers, then private forests can't be so big because there's a land ceiling act in India and I can't own more than this much of land. But the thing is, if you look at it as a small incentive, what we are trying to do is that the farm just outside the tiger reserve's boundary. These should have been, they were agricultural fields which are totally barren. We, instead of choosing to farm them, we just let it grow wild. Now, it's, as a small gesture, it's quite important because it basically sets an example. I've met people who told us that we got inspired by Badlav and we're doing something here and we're doing something here. I met farmers who's not farming a part of the land because they think we let this go by. And I'm not the only one around here. There are 4 or 5, at least 6 or 7 other people in this and a couple of adjoining districts who are doing the same. Just as an example, as something which motivates other people, it's significant. I've been trying to, along my land, I've been trying to motivate the other farmers to gradually get into orchards instead of farming. The thing with orchards is, see, farming is primary industries and conservation only. It's very simple. Farmers don't want any wild animal coming inside their farm. This includes all the prey, like they don't want deer, wild pigs, hare, even nothing coming. So they keep it free of wildlife.
Right.
Now, that is because, say, a 2 Nil guy in a 1 acre farm can demolish that farm. So, but if there were orchards there, then say, guava is a big crop here. So if there were guava orchards here, for 3 or 4 years, you have to take care of the tree and make sure that the nilgais and the wild boars stay out. But after 3 years, the tree becomes tall enough that it doesn't matter if these animals go through. So we try to motivate people to, if not wild trees, okay, start orchards which will actually make you money, but it won't disturb the animal, the wild animals that go through. It's working, slowly it will work, well, hopefully.
So you're motivating people to live in harmony with the wildlife.
Yes, I mean, we started with that idea. We didn't start this with that idea in mind. We just started it because we wanted to do it. And in fact, for a good 10, 12 years, nobody even knew about it. And now that people know, it's nice. I mean, people actually appreciate it. Even the farmers, I've had people living, the next door farmer, neighborhood farmer, he's also quite impressed. He said he did a good thing. He's now growing an orchard slowly. So yes, it's the motivation thing came on its own. We didn't start it to motivate anybody as such.
Okay, another question. Can you say in one sentence what is the contribution of Fateh Singh Rathore and Valmik Thapar, since you've known both of them very well?
Okay, so Fateh Singh Rathore, in one sentence, created this habitat.
Created
this habitat. So he was, if you ask me, he was known as the Tiger Man of India. What he was really good at, and which he didn't get very well known for, is creating habitats. He had a different vision to the whole landscape. The 3 lakes that you see, the tracks that you see in the park, the paths that you see, the natural waterholes that you see were pretty much all created by him. So he created a bulk of this habitat. While creating, Fateh Singh also was a very controversial figure who would, if he didn't get along with you, he would be very blunt on your face, which for a bureaucrat was not a very good thing to do. So his partnership with Valmik Thapar is definitely India's most powerful spokesperson for tigers. Whether we like it or not, there's no doubt about it. And Fateh Singh and Valmik, as in a partnership, got that Valmik gave him the backing that you can do things, and I'm there to take care of the consequences as such. So I mean, massive. Both of them had they still have a massive contribution. Very big. Of course, they couldn't have done it without we don't. People living here don't. They had a whole team of some fantastic officers and forest guards who backed them to the hilt. I mean, they still back them to. They still have that very solid loyalty.
Yeah. I was reading your book, Noor.
Yes.
It left me with a feeling that Scientists laugh at the theory of anthropomorphism, where we think that wild animals have got emotions like human beings. But I think the world is slowly coming to believe that there are emotions which are common with humans and wild animals. In fact, I was reminded of seeing that film called The Octopus Teacher, where even an octopus could relate to a human being. So the way Noor and the family is related to you, I thought was very similar. A wild animal can share some emotions with you. Though it probably is very wrong to think that basic instincts of a wild animal and human being are the same. They are not.
Wild animals have emotions. It would be wrong to say that they don't have emotions. It's just that their emotions are not like how we think their emotions are. Because we have our emotions are very different because we have an exceptionally developed socio-cultural surrounding. Wild animals do have emotions. There is no doubt about it. The most powerful bond, social bond in the world, in nature, which is also the most powerful emotion, is the mother-child bond. That is that is also a very emotional bond. I mean, across species, across animals, I would say, at least the more complex species. So to say that wild animals don't have emotions is wrong. According to me, all complex organisms, especially the mammals and all, which are like the most complex animals, have emotions. Animals like tigers and a lot of mammals, they have their own society. Though we say tigers are solitary, but they have their own social setup. I mean, George Schaller had said this fantastic line, tigers are solitary but never alone. Because they are connected to other tigers in their territory. Yeah. So all animals are, especially mammals, most of them are, they have a complex society. Now, to have a society, there have to be some relationships, some emotions, but their emotions are not as developed as, say, ours, as human beings, for instance, or say gorillas or as chimpanzees, but they do have emotions. Now, the thing is, we have to keep, when we, anthropomorphism is more of when we decide that the other animals have the same emotional setup as we do. They don't have the same emotional setup as we do. For instance, in the wild, one of the strongest bonds in the world is the mother and the offspring's bond. Now, in the wild, if say there's a deer with a fawn, and the fawn gets attacked by a predator and gets killed, the mother deer probably stays there, tries to save the fawn as much as it can or whatever. But once it's gone, she just walks out and it's over. The next day, I don't think, it's back to. So the emotional setup is different. But modern man has actually conditioned his life or sheltered his life in such a way that we can't even think like how wild is. Wild is all about survive to the next day. That's it. That the only goal in life is to survive to the next day and ideally survive to the next generation. That's it. So that is my way of living.
Yes, I think survival is the most important instinct for them.
Yeah.
And it's very wrong to think that basic emotions of humans and animals can be the same. They can be very different.
No, they can't be. Even basic emotions of humans can't be the same to some extent.
Yes, exactly. You are right.
Different societies have different emotional quotients also.
Yes. Okay. My next question is going to be about what's your take on the role of wildlife photography in wildlife conservation?
See, if you ask me, one of the most powerful tools of wildlife conservation Uh, One of the most required tools of wildlife conservation is getting the message out. Getting the message out to the rest of the population, which is huge, which is 8 billion people. Now, imagery, photography, and filmmaking are one of the best ways of getting the message out. It's for this reason that like you have concepts like you have competitions like conservation films, best conservation film, or best conservation photography, because there's obviously a direct connect between. If you see, like, when we were kids, there was hardly any TV or there was no internet as such. So whatever little we knew about wildlife was from some books that we had access to. And that time there weren't even so many books that we had access to. Contrasted, say, to my daughter, who's now nearly 11 years old. And she knows about deep sea creatures which live in deep sea trenches. She knows a lot of things which we would have never, which we would have struggled to get. Now, the only reason she knows about all of this is she's seen the imagery. She's either seen the pictures or seen the videos or seen a documentary on them or seen a YouTube video on them or seen some photos somewhere of them. So to get the message out, there is nothing more powerful than visual imagery, still images or moving images. The power of imagery to push any cause is fantastic, it's stunning. And it's the same with wildlife. It's the same with wildlife conservation. I mean, the imagery makes the person reading about that connect to the story almost immediately. So it's a superbly powerful tool. We still haven't realized how powerful it is in India, but globally, like if you see some of the Western countries, they have fine-tuned it to a next level. I mean, they have photo-hole cameras, hide cameras, cameras on nests. They have this. They're broadcasting the stuff live. It just connects a person to it very strong.
But that hasn't really led to more conservation in the West.
Conservation
imagery remains for the sake of imagery.
No, it's not for the sake of imagery. Tell me, for instance, in India, with 1.4 billion people, we still have tigers. That is conservation. That's serious conservation. We had, when we had a population of, say, 400 million, we had less tigers than we have now. That is conservation. It's very strong. The fact that, so when we talk about conservation, one of the things that we ignore because we can't accept it is that the single biggest problem for conservation in the world, if you wanted to sum it up in one word, that word is consumption. This is like a long research which was done by a couple of universities and WWF in collaboration. Their summary of the whole research says that if we had to sum up the whole problem with conservation and nature's destruction globally, then it can be summed up in one word: consumption. So it's very simple. So if we are looking at serious conservation, we need to cut down our consumption by 1/10 of what we're doing. So in a way, we need to go something pretty much close to what the lockdown was. I mean, like for 3 months during COVID, the world locked down and things cleaned up, rivers cleaned up, lakes cleaned up, oceans cleaned up in 3 months, 3 months of lockdown. So if we really want to do conservation, we have to figure out that we are not living right. The biggest conservation is about the man. It's not about the animals. It's not about the forest. Conservation is about the man cutting his requirements down. So I mean, we feel that there's no conservation now, but just look at this. In the last 25 years, India's population has doubled. So if you look at it this way, like from the time Project Tiger started till now, which is nearly 50 years, I mean, it's 50 years now, our population has gone up by 2.5 times. And we have more tigers. That is conservation.
Yes. Images, I guess, help you get closer to nature. And they say that if you love something, you tend to protect it more.
Yes. Simple.
So whether it is image of the tiger or image of the landscape or image of the greenery, the more we see it, maybe the more we want to conserve it. And then we think about how to conserve it. And that is when reduction in
Yes.
consumption.
Yeah.
I think your book is selling well globally.
It is. See, we did that book. For instance, the reason we did that book, one of the biggest reasons was we crowdfunded the book. I don't know if you know that. So that basically means we sold most of the copies. Yeah, we sold nearly 50% of the copies before the book was even published. So we sold half the copies before we printed the book. And those people got the book, and the balance were shared between the two authors.
So the fact that there are wild tigers in India, and India is the only country which has got more than half the world's wild population.
We keep saying that we are the only country which has more than half the world's tigers. The reason for that is wild tigers. The reason for that is we have 70% of the tiger habitat. I mean, so obviously we are going to have 60 or 70% of the wild tigers. Tiger is more of a Eastern Asian animal as such. You know, the Caspian tiger or the Siberian tiger were big, but those areas, Caspian tiger, they believe at times that maybe the Siberian and the Caspian were the same. But bulk of the tigers now, for the last 30, 40 years, bulk of the tiger habitat is there in India, in the Indian subcontinent, I would say.
Right. What is your next project? Photography project?
For 2-3 years, my photography is on a bit of a pause, partly because of the pandemic. Secondly, I was busy with my own personal things. But my big photography project is Ranthambhore. It's been going on for 22 years and it will go on for the next 20 years. So I am documenting Ranthambhore. I'm going to do it for another 20-30 years. So that will go on.